Canada, the second largest country in the world, stretching across nearly 10 million square kilometers, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and all the way up to the Arctic Ocean. Vast forests, endless tundra, majestic mountains, and more freshwater lakes than any other nation. And yet, despite its sheer size, Canada feels almost empty. With just under 40 million people, the country has fewer inhabitants than Spain, and even California alone has more people than all of Canada. So, how can such an enormous land be so sparsely populated? Today, we're exploring the paradox of Canada. Immense, but almost empty. Let's start with scale. Canada covers about 9.98 million square kilometers, making it only slightly smaller than Russia. To put that into perspective, you could fit all of the European Union inside Canada and still have plenty of space left over. But here's the catch. Much of Canada's territory is not exactly welcoming. Around 80% of Canadians live within just 200 kilometers of the US border. Why? 'Cause the further north you go, the harsher life becomes. The country is dominated by the Canadian Shield, massive geological formation of ancient rock, thin soils, and countless lakes. It's beautiful, but not exactly ideal for large-scale farming or dense settlement. Beyond that lies the Arctic, where temperatures plunge, permafrost dominates, and the growing season is only a few weeks long. One of the biggest reasons Canada is so empty is the climate. The southern strip near the border enjoys relatively moderate weather, but much of the rest of Canada faces long, brutal winters. Think about it. Yellowknife, a city in the Northwest Territories, experiences average January temperatures of -26 degrees Celsius. In some northern communities, the sun disappears for weeks during the winter and summers are short and mild at best. Not surprisingly, it's difficult to sustain large populations under these conditions. Building infrastructure, transporting goods, and simply heating homes become extremely expensive. And this naturally pushes most Canadians to cluster in the warmer southern regions. Despite its massive size, Canada's population is concentrated in a handful of urban areas. Nearly half of all Canadians live in just 3 provinces: Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia. Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver dominate the map. These cities not only offer milder climates, but also economic opportunities, cultural hubs, and connections to global trade. Outside of these major centers, there are only small towns and isolated communities spread across the endless landscape. Flying over Canada, you'll often see nothing but forests, lakes, and wilderness for hours. In fact, if you were to drive across the country, you'd quickly realize that most of it feels like empty space with the occasional cluster of civilization. But geography and climate aren't the only reasons for Canada's sparse population. History also played a role. Unlike the United States, where waves of settlers moved inland and expanded rapidly, Canadian settlement was far more limited. Harsh conditions slowed expansion. And economic activity was often tied to natural resources like fur, timber, and later, mining and oil rather than dense agriculture and industry. Even today, Canada's economy relies heavily on resource extraction, oil sands in Alberta, mining in the north, forestry across vast areas. These industries generate wealth, but they don't require large populations spread evenly across the land. Instead, they often depend on temporary workers in remote locations. This means Canada developed as a country with a few big urban centers and a lot of empty wilderness in between. Interestingly, Canada's population is growing mainly through immigration. Each year, hundreds of thousands of people move to Canada, drawn by stability, education, and opportunities. But most of them still settle in the same southern urban areas. Few new arrivals move to the Yukon or Nunavut for obvious reasons. This means the pattern of Canada being huge but concentrated remains the same. Even with immigration, projections suggest that Canada will reach around 50 million people by mid-century. Still impressive, but compared to the country's enormous landmass, it will remain one of the least densely populated nations in the world. So here lies the paradox of Canada. A country so vast that it could easily host hundreds of millions of people, yet so challenging that only a narrow strip near the US border is truly settled. In a way, this emptiness is part of Canada's identity. It's the land of untouched wilderness, pristine lakes, endless forests, and the northern lights. While other nations struggle with overcrowding, Canada represents space, silence, and the raw power of nature. And maybe that's not such a bad paradox after all.